This is Evangelist George McTire from the Word of God Ministry, and our message for this particular session is from the right side of the issue. Now, when I'm talking about right side, I'm not talking necessarily about the right side like the Democratic side or the left side being the Democratic Party side. I'm talking about the right side as it pertains to the Word of God. However, in this message, I'm not going to be making any scriptural references, but the whole point of the message is to focus on, I guess, what you could say is the fact or the need for people to use wisdom when it comes down to who they vote for, and knowledge and understanding, which is one of the key things that the book of Proverbs talks about in chapter number 1. And all three of these things are key when you are dealing with situations and you need to make a decision about something. You need to have all of the information available to you to study, to look at, and to use your knowledge of certain things to be able to come up with what is the correct path for you to pursue or the correct choice for you to make, regardless of what other people might think. We got this habit of having what they used to, some people call a tribal mentality, which simply means that if you are a member of a tribe, or like over in Africa or something like that, if you're a member of a tribe or something like that, everybody's supposed to think the same way as the tribal leaders say you're supposed to think. Well, we have that type of thing going on here in this nation when it comes down to the black community, even though it's not just for the black community, but it's for everybody to be able to understand, look at the information that's presented to you, and to be able to determine the proper course that you need to take. Now, the title for this message is The Democratic Party Has a Sign Out. It's a help wanted sign or a sign that says we need, we are hiring or whatever. And what the sign says is it says that victims are wanted. Victims are wanted. Now, looking at all of the recent killings of American citizens by illegal immigrants, a couple of things come to mind. First, those killings, though tragic, are proving a very simple point. And that point is they are all tied to the Democratic Party and its stance on those illegal immigrants. Now, if you will consider the actions and statements made by Democrats after one of these killings, they all take the same position or the tribal mentality position, and that is it is because of Donald Trump and his policies, not only on immigration issues but other issues as well. They are completely avoiding any culpability, but let the record show they opened up the borders to let them, these immigrants, freely come in under Joe Biden. They didn't need no ID, they didn't need anything. People were warning you, letting people in here, you don't know where they come from. You don't know how they feel about America. Are they friend or foe? All you know is you just letting them in here. And then not only that, they provided sanctuary cities for them to live and to thrive in. And so, in other words, you invited all these people in. They scattered all over the country, but certain states have certain cities that have declared themselves sanctuary cities for these people to come and to reside in and thrive. Now, when they got to these sanctuary cities, and even before they got there, because they had to travel, so you know what the government did under Biden? They gave them free food stamps, free housing, health care, and money cards, all provided by the taxpayers of this nation. And they didn't even ask us, they just did it. And what makes it worse is the fact that they did it for them, talking about these illegal immigrants, while millions of Americans of all races and veterans go homeless and are sleeping on the streets. That's pitiful. We got Americans, some of whom have paid taxes into the system, but when it comes time for them to try to get some help from the system isn't helping them. They are helping the illegal immigrants and providing them with better care and so forth than the previous taxpayers that's now homeless out in the street. Now, what could possibly be their reason for doing this? Why are the Democrats doing this? It's very simple. They want their power back. When Donald Trump took office in 2016, that was the signal that their control of the masses, especially blacks, was coming to an end. They had been playing the black community for over 55 years and taking our vote for granted. But things started to change when Trump issued a challenge to the black community. He asked people, he said, look here, you might hate me now and so forth, and you hang with the Democratic Party, but they haven't done nothing for you. So what have you got to lose by voting for me? Blacks started to think about that, then they acted. Trump got elected and the Democrats were shaken into a new reality. Without the black vote, their goose was cooked. They realized that they needed a new bunch of people of color to replace the black vote. In his comedy, stand-up comedy, I forget, I don't know what you call it, a show that he did called Richard, well, it was Richard Pryor, and the comedy thing about that nigger's crazy. He used a term that basically described how the Democratic Party thought about us or thinks about the black community. Because what he said is uh, that the Democrats or the slave owners and so forth back then, which is what the Democratic Party is, needed a bunch of new niggers. And back in the 70s and so forth, it was the Vietnamese. Today, it's these illegal immigrants from all over the world that are flooding our country every day thanks to Joe Biden. So they started a crusade of false charges against Trump and finding all sorts of faults with Trump and his administration. Meanwhile, they were cooking up a scheme to steal the 2020 election if it became necessary. That means they weren't taking any chances. They knew what they needed to do, and they figured out, well, we'll try to get the black vote back. And what they were trying to do with all these phony charges and things against Donald Trump is to slow the momentum he had, because when he got in office, within 3 years, think about that, within 3 years, the unemployment rates for the black community went down to the lowest rate, the lowest in history. And that goes for everybody else, but especially the black community, the lowest in history. Thousands, tens of thousands, I've heard even numbers up in the millions of people were able to get off of welfare because they finally had jobs where they could be self-sufficient and they didn't need government handouts. And that's one of the things that the Democratic Party thrives on, is they thrive on keeping people in a position where you need what they provide, which is government handouts. And naturally, if a Republican stands up and says they're going to cut those handouts out and things like that and provide real sources of opportunity for people to get jobs, well, you know, the first thing the Democrats are going to say is that the Republicans are against the poor. It's racist. It's this, that, and the other. You know, when all the time it's because of the actions of the Democratic Party. Well, let's go on a little further here. Now, people like Maxine Waters, John Lewis, Elijah Cummings, and several other blacks started promoting the idea that Trump stole the 2016 elections. That was, you know, when he got inaugurated, before he got inaugurated. I remember John Lewis openly said before Trump even got elected, before he got sworn in, he was not going to accept Donald Trump as president. And naturally, when he said that, and along with a bunch of other black leadership like the ones I just named, the whole of the black community a lot of them began to fall right in line and saying, well, we aren't going to accept it either. And the thing is, what happened is the fact that they urged blacks to take to the streets. This came from Maxine Waters especially. They urged blacks to take to the streets, confront and resist the racist police that were targeting them. They were told. So that is what many of them did. In other words, because Trump was a racist, then all of a sudden all of the federal government, police, law enforcement, and everything else racist as well. And since you have black leadership telling blacks that these law enforcement people were targeting them simply because they're black, and that they need to resist, and they need to confront, and they need to just act a fool with the law enforcement, because they are all racist. That's what they were told, and that's what many of them did. Now, the thing is, that led in a lot of cases to them talking about these blacks getting injured and killed. And with that, black victimization accusations became standard talking points for the Democrats. In other words, a black person gets stopped by the police, and instead of doing what the police tell them to do, they want to mouth off to the police. Not they don't want to cooperate with the police. They don't want to do this, and police try to handcuff them. They want to fight with the police. Well, the police officer's not going to stand there and just let you uh, do whatever you want to do to them. That's not what their job is. And the result, quite frankly, is this. You either do what the law enforcement officer says, or they're going to do something to get you under control. And if you act enough fool with them, they're going to take you out of here or send you out of here. And that's what happened in a lot of these cases, because the people were acting a fool with the police instead of obeying the police. I remember when I'm almost 80 years old now. When I was a child, my parents and my grandparents always told me the same thing. The police officers are your friends, and if you ever are out somewhere and the police stop you and they tell you to do something, do it. Don't ask no questions. Just do what you were told to do. Now, naturally, I was born here in Detroit, up here in the north. I don't know what they were telling the people down south, what they were telling the kids down there. But up here, we knew to obey the police. But see, these people get out there and they get to acting a fool with the police, and the police don't have any alternative but to uh, bring the person under control. And if they keep on fighting and carrying on, then the probability is high enough that they probably are going to get injured or killed. Now, in reality, these people, the Democrats, don't give a damn about the lives that were lost. What they wanted was someone that would bring blacks back to their plantation, I mean their party. In other words, the Democrats were setting people up to get out here, and knowing how a lot of blacks are, especially when you talking about race and racism and so forth, they gonna get out here and do everything they can, and mess around here and get killed. Then the Democrats gonna say, "Oh, it's because of Donald Trump and his racist uh, police force and so forth," and carrying on, doing all of that to try to get blacks to come back to their party. Well, if you fast forward to today, they are using similar tactics to get the rest of society to believe all these killings by illegals, by illegal aliens of American citizens, which they call undocumented immigrants, is once again Trump's fault, even though it is their party that is shielding them from the law enforcement. Judges override the verdicts of juries and let known criminal immigrants back out on the streets, in many instances to kill again, or they rule to prevent federal authorities from deporting them, talking about these illegal immigrants, out of the country. They are doing this to increase the number of victims among us to use to blame Trump for. That's all it is. They want their power back so much that they will put everybody at risk look at the thing about the shutdown that we're in right now. What is the shutdown for? Where I don't know how many millions of people are being inconvenienced because federal offices are shut down or so forth, or the TSA agents have been working for over a month without paychecks and so forth, and many of them have had to quit and find other jobs because they're getting ready to lose their houses and things. All of this chaos that's going on in Washington over all of these, with all this stuff happening, inconveniencing almost the entire country for what? Because the Democrats want to protect illegal aliens, because the whole thing boils around the Immigration and Customs Enforcement Officers, or ICE, as known by everybody else, and it's been blasted all over the news media. So the Democrats, like I say, they don't give a damn about anybody else. And something else was brought up. Now this came from a Republican, but this goes to show you the point where how things are and what Democrats feel about it. One Republican, John Kennedy, made a motion that said essentially this: as long as we have this shutdown and TSA workers are working without pay, and other people have lost their money, and we're inconveniencing the country, he suggested that the senators don't get paychecks until such time as they get back to work. Now you got to remember, these people work for us, but they're going to punish us and still draw their paychecks. And Republican John Kennedy says that's not right. We should not be getting our checks until we get this matter resolved. Well, one Democrat stood up in the Senate and said he objected, and then immediately walked out of the Senate. Now, see, I didn't know about this rule, but all it takes is one person to object over something. And what usually happens is the person is supposed to be given time to explain what the objection was. But see, by this person objecting and the leaving the room, and from what I understand, he left the premises. They couldn't question him, so that put everything on hold, and the senators are going to continue getting their paychecks while other people are working without their paychecks, all because of the Democratic Party. And when you ask some of the Democrats about something like this, you know what they're talking about is we got to have some sort of leverage. Now, let's remind you also of this. Democrats are always talking about democracy, democracy, democracy. Well, democracy says the majority rules. That the majority uh, has if there's a majority, then whoever is in the majority, they're the ones that make the rules. The ones in the minority can kind of object to certain things, but uh, by right, the majority should, the minority basically has to go along with the majority. Not this time, see, because before Donald Trump in this 2024 elections, there were always questions about the fact that even though a Republican won the presidency because of the Electoral College, a majority of Americans voted for the Democrat. And so they could always make that argument. They can't make that argument this time because in the 2026 elections, Donald Trump won both the Electoral College vote and the majority of the vote. And what are the Democrats doing? They talking about the hell with democracy, and now they out here raising all this sand and putting the country in inconvenience and things, and making it more dangerous for us because our enemies are watching everything that's going on. And if they decide to come in here and try to take us over, they could almost do it. Why? Because we too busy. We don't have enough agents out and to police the borders or watch who's coming into the country and things like that. So that's a whole lot of mess going on, all because of the Democrats. But to hear them say it, it's the Republican, it's Donald Trump's fault. Now, see, like I said, they are doing this to increase the number of victims so that they can use that to blame Trump for it. Now, the other thing, when I said there were a couple of things I was thinking about, the other thing won't take quite as long. But you think about this. You know about these radical suicide bombers and things that go around blowing themselves people up along with themselves and things like that. How do these people get recruited into something like this? Well, these radical suicide bombers that we hear so much about, they come from impoverished families. Now that's the key right there, impoverished families. In other words, these people are poor. They are, everyone is starving, and there's no hope for any bright future for them. Well, so along comes some of these terrorist groups, and they tell these people that wind up being the suicide bombers that if they go out and blow something up, usually including themselves, that the group will take care of the rest of their family, and they will go to heaven and have 70 virgins. That's it. They make them a promise to take care of their families, and whether they actually do take care of their families, I don't know, because the suicide bomber don't isn't making a report about it, because the suicide bomber is usually dead. And as far as these 70 virgins are concerned, well, we all know where that goes. It ain't going nowhere. But the point is, they always go to the impoverished, poor people that need assistance from government or from those in charge, just like with the Democratic Party. The Democratic Party's whole mindset is to keep as many people impoverished without a job, depending on government handouts, government health care, and all that other stuff, just so they can use that when it comes time for them to run for an election or something like that. Now, like I said, the families of these victims of these people that were getting shot and killed, being killed here in the nation by these illegal immigrants, are usually going to receive some sort of settlement money for the loss of their loved ones. But think about this. But it will be the taxpayer that pays them, and not the politicians that put them in that position in the first place. Democratic policies always create victims that they can use at election time to try to get their power back. And all it takes is a willing public to go along with it, despite all of the evidence. I just given you a bunch of evidence as it stands right now. So let me ask you a question as I close this out. Are you or one of your family members going to be next? Think about that this election season. Well, this is Evangelist George McTire closing our message out for the right side, and I hope that you will take uh, careful consideration of what you've heard here, and don't just take my word for it. Read the newspapers. Read newspapers from the left. See, most of the problem with the black community, especially, is we always listen to only one side of the issue, and that's the side of the left, the CNN, the MSNBCs, and the CBS, and some of those other left-leaning station, networks and so forth like that. But when it comes down to what the right side has to say, the Republican side or the right side of the news media and things say, people ain't, we don't have no time to hear that. So in other words, you're basically going in with half of the information, and that's what the Democrats are dependent on. They know that as long as they can keep you from taking a close examination of what they're actually about and doing, they got you just where they want you. I said so many people going around talking about the fact how Joe Biden, the unemployment rate reached its lowest in history under Joe Biden. It may have under Joe Biden, but it had already gotten to the lowest in history when Donald Trump left office. Joe Biden came in and the unemployment rate was still going down. That's the dirty little secret that the Democrats don't want you to know. The job market didn't stop just because Donald Trump, because Joe Biden took office. Jobs were still being created as residue from the Trump administration, what he did when he was in office the first 4 years. So Joe Biden comes in and inherits that, and then we hear from the left wing news media about how under Joe Biden the unemployment rate is the lowest in history, as if he did anything to lower that. So, like I'm saying, you got to get look at both sides of the issue, just like in a court of law. If you're on a jury and you have to go to a court and listen to a case where there's been a crime or something committed, you're going to have to listen to both sides of the issue. Now, you don't have no problem listening to that in a courtroom, but when it comes down to something that's going to affect your life personally and probably the lives of your family members, your children, your grandchildren, and so forth, you want to cut one half of that off and not pay them any attention? Think about it. So, once again, this is Evangelist George McTire from the Word of God Ministry on the right side saying, good day.